Screen juice.
Hello again, Juicers, and welcome to another episode of Screen Juice. Today, I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on the 2019 movie Tolkien. I will be avoiding spoilers for those of you who might not yet have seen it. So, Tolkien was released in May of 2019 and stars Nicholas Hoult as the titular character, alongside Lily Collins, Colm Meaney, and Derek Jacobi. The film is a biographical drama that tells the story of J.R.R. Tolkien, the famous author behind The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and several other stories. Now, while I can say that I have read and thoroughly enjoyed Tolkien's most famous stories, my knowledge of his own life was not particularly strong. I mean, sure, I knew that he'd served in World War I, but that might have been about it. In this movie, I was hoping and almost kind of expecting to find a link between his life and his works, and whilst it's clear that the filmmakers portrayed some of that here, there is no reason at all to assume that if you liked The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit movies, that you would like Tolkien. It's also worth explaining that the Tolkien estate made it clear that they do not endorse the film or its content prior to its release. So with that in mind, I don't really want to talk about some of the historical inaccuracies or parts of the timeline that some people felt were missing. I just want to focus on the movie as a self-contained piece of entertainment. So what story does the film present us with? Well, the film focuses on the early life and challenges of John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. The story moves carefully through clear acts that follow his struggles with universal challenges such as belonging, romance, maturity, duty, loss, and finally, legacy. It's cleverly written and it has a nice dusting of references for fans of the author's work, but it remains immediately accessible for someone with no knowledge of his work at all. The film is a period piece about intellectual types who study at Oxford and have a love for the arts, so you can expect everyone to be rather well spoken throughout, and it's a script about characters and not about action. It's worth noting, however, that it's paced well enough to keep you interested for the entire runtime. One of the reasons you might find it hard to look away will be the beautiful images that the film gives you. It certainly takes its settings very seriously. At times, the world that Tolkien inhabits is just gorgeous. From the streets of Oxford through lush English countryside to a hell-like battlefield. It's often beautifully and wonderfully colourful. The film also manages to keep you a little on your toes by flash-forwarding to war-torn France whenever you might be at risk of becoming too comfortable in the quaint and romantic gardens of Oxford. I particularly enjoyed the way that some fantasy elements were worked into Tolkien's fevered view of the battlefield. The more subtle they were, the more I enjoyed them. It doesn't serve any great purpose in the storytelling, but knowing the work that the author would go on to create in the future seems to have given the filmmakers license to use some of this wild imagery. And I get that some people may not enjoy that, but I thought it was a nice touch, and it made all of these scenes more hellish and more dramatic. Now, all of these moments are nicely enhanced by the score, a score by the great Thomas Newman. Now, I love Thomas Newman's work on films such as American Beauty or Meet Joe Black or just a long list of others. For Tolkien, however, he's put together an excellent backdrop for the movie and with additions that hint ever so slightly towards the masterpiece created by Howard Shore for the Lord of the Rings trilogy. If I have one criticism here, however, it's that it lacks any kind of consistent theme. It's not something I could recall and then hum from memory. With that aside, however, the music always seems appropriate and it adds a sense of wonder and mystery to the film. On top of all this, of course, the film has a very solid cast and the performances were really great. I mean, Nicholas Hoult is able to convey so much of the character struggle when he can't voice his feelings due to the expectations of those around him, in a world of the stiff upper lip, where one must put one's feelings aside and do what a man must do. Lily Collins is equally wonderful, and their relationship is one of the main drivers of the movie. I do wish we could have seen more of Derek Jacobi, who plays Professor Wright in the movie. He's mesmerising, and at one point he manages to grip your attention. It's with something so subtle and simple as the explanation of the word oak. For me, however, one of the most engaging performances of the entire movie was the ensemble cast from Tolkien's youth. The creation and escapades of the Tea Club and Barovian Society are some of the more engaging parts of the film, feeling at times like something taken from Dead Poets Society. As a whole, this is a thoughtful and romantic, character-driven movie which was clearly made with love, and I really enjoyed it. It is fair to say that it doesn't reach the heights achieved by other greats in this same genre, and I think I know what it is that's missing. In other films of this type, there is some kind of great tragedy that the main character has to overcome, and sometimes that tragedy comes from within in the form of an addiction or a disability. In the case of Tolkien, the great tragedy is glossed over or lacks impact. For example, Tolkien suffers a great loss at a young age, but we barely see how it affects him. He also serves in the Great War, but when we see snippets of him amongst the horror, he isn't fighting, he's wrapped up in a blanket and stumbling around with an escort. Now, there's no doubt that Tolkien faced some very difficult times, but they are not what this film is focusing on. Instead, we're told to feel for a young man who studies at Oxford amongst his well-to-do friends. There is no great inner battle that pushes us to want to see Tolkien prevail. And finally, to give the filmmakers a little extra credit here, it must have been very difficult to write a story about a man who could clearly have written it better himself. And on that note, I just want to say thank you for watching, and if you want to see more like this, please subscribe to the channel and maybe leave some suggestions for me in the comments. I'm still very new to this, and I'd like to know if it's something you want to see more of. I've been Dave, we've been Screen Juice, and I'll see you again soon.